So we are an organization that belongs with other 7 Atlantic programs around the world, and we're striving for more equitable societies that are just, right? So when we speak about a healthier, more equal nation, we're talking about the fact that we can't be well and as well as healthy if asnam mhlaba, for example, right? We can't be well and we can't be okay if asnam sebenzi, for example, right? We can't be well and we can't be okay if we know Gutamadoda are still killing us, right? So those are the things that we talk about when we're speaking about social determinants of health, okay? So today we've got 3 panelists who are going to introduce themselves because I think Abantu, it's important for people to introduce themselves how they want to be known, right? So I'm going to start with Dr. Pali, who's going to be giving us a keynote speech, and then after that we'll move on to a panel discussion between Ukialebucha and Nokwanda. So ngicela sibaphe izandla. Do you need me to help you? Please do. Or I can introduce you.
No, I introduce myself. Good morning. Lepizilwan. Molweni. Yeah. Nna ke padi Lehosha. High School Lesotho. That's where I was born and bred. But I moved to South Africa, and that's where I am now as a South African citizen. My work has been at Statistics South Africa for a very long time. And there we've been collating information from yourselves. You've opened your houses and allowed us to talk to you. And the responsibility then for us is to bring those facts about your lives together to give a picture of what South Africa looks like and what it will look like in the future if we do certain things. If we don't do those, it may look differently. So, Yendalhol, Yalebo.
Sanbonani, igama lami uNokwanda Sihlali, ngibuya Land and Accountability Research Center, based UCT. Ngijabule kabi ukuba la namhlanje sijime sajima Nkosi yami igazi liyasebenza namhlanje. So today I'm speaking about a connection between land and health, and I think we're very excited to be here, and thank you for the invite.
Dumelang motlong. Lina ke Kialeboga Ramaro. Can I speak Setswana? Ko gae nna ke tswa Kimberley. Ko gae re Batswana kana o ka beke Afrikaans praat. O ka beke Afrikaans. Okay. I think I'll switch between English le Setswana. Ko gae ke ko Kimberley mar ke dula Cape Town. Ke tlile mo as one of the fellows at Tekano. Jaka nte ba buile gore ko Tekano re berekisana ka a re bua ka health, ga re buela gore motho a ye tleliniking a kry dipiele mare re sheba gore batho ba dula kae, gore metsi a rona ntse yang, gore re na le metsi a sekono, re na le di-toilet tse di berekang, and gore dilo tseo di impacta yang maphelo a rona. More than anything, Tekano e mpoditse gore e nkopile gore ke tlo go bua ka bomme vandag, gore dilo tse ntse bomme ke bone ba shebellang malapa a rona, bo babynyana fa a ba fela ha the first thing that they say ke mama o bona a go thubega sengo mo tlung, and like re buile gore re dula mo society e tletseng le ka GBV. So we want to speak a little bit about health and what we call the social determinants of health, and ke itse gore sekgoa se sentsi. It's very big English, but hopefully gore ha re buisana we can understand each other, and like nteba a buile gore rona Tata dilo tse re di itse from research go buisana le ngena, but at the end of the day these are your lived experiences, and we're hoping that as we speak you can share a lot more because that's your daily reality. So ke a leboga, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to the panelists. I'm going to hand over right now to Dr. Pali, who's going to tell us, Uguti, you know, when we speak about this triple challenge, what is the story now, and what is it going to take us as Abahlali to move into the next story, right? So the story right now is that we know that the face of poverty, of unemployment, is that of a black woman, right? Senzandoni tina as abahlali to make sure that in the next decade of this freedom, how do we change that narrative, right? So please, can you welcome Dr. Bali?
I'm going to have a very difficult time. If you had a stand on which I would plug this so that I can use my two hands to do what I do, alternatively, I can get a table. But let me start. Today. Yes, I can use the chair. I can use the chair. No, just put the chair here, facing this way. Then I'll do this. Yeah. So we'll improvise. I had a presentation that I was going to project, because when you talk about numbers, you can't read them. They don't make sense. But if you present them in graphs, they make a lot of meaning. But now that we don't have a projection, we can't project, that's fine. We will. So I've been asked to talk about poverty, unemployment, and inequality. And poverty, when you look at it, is not consistent with a knowledge society. You can't be a knowledge society and be poor, unless there's something dramatically wrong in the system. So one of the things that we have as a problem is that our knowledge system, or our aspiration to be a knowledge society, is highly defective. One, in a knowledge society, is a well-informed society. And once it's well-informed, it increasingly gets better informed. And in a complete knowledge society, all the information of the world is available to everyone, available everywhere, available simultaneously, and available freely. Now, the problem is that there are the non-technological infrastructure. That is, I have a phone. It's a technological infrastructure. It's here. It's here. I can look at it. I can do things with it. But there are limitations, and those limitations are about literacy. That people are not literate. People do not have means of promotion or accessing promotion and use of knowledge. They don't have access. And also basic freedoms don't exist. And by basic freedoms, it's not the freedom to vote. It's the freedom that your stomach every day is full. That's a basic freedom. In the absence of that, you cannot. So what happens in our societies when you think about knowledge? What we have, it's Mgozi. That's what governs us. Mgozi doesn't have to be true. Slander, that kind of thing. Now, that is knowledge as information. Information just like this. But knowledge as understanding is one which is scientific, where the facts are distilled and deliberated upon. And knowledge as insight, competence, and authority is when you have this scientific knowledge that you process and you become selective about how you apply it. So you'll be selective around saying, I want to impact on poverty. That's selective application. You're saying, I'll choose to act on poverty, I'll choose to act on crime, I'll choose to. So you become selective about this knowledge. And that then becomes competence and authority. If then we are not able to deal with the basic tenets of information and knowledge society, then we are incompetent. So there's no doubt where we are in South Africa that we are incompetent. That's the starting point. And you can only measure this competence or incompetence by looking and collating the evidence, and that evidence correlates with lived experiences. And I want to go to the lived experiences. The lived experiences can only be captured effectively when one applies certain specific lenses. And those lenses are generated largely by the United Nations Committee of Experts on Public Administration. And they talk to three things: effectiveness, accountability, and inclusiveness. And where I come from, under effectiveness, one has to talk about competence, talk about sound policy making, and then, of course, collaboration. And then, of course, under accountability, we have to talk about integrity, transparency, independent oversight. And under inclusiveness, it's leaving no one behind, non-discrimination, participation, and subsidiarity. So, now, I've spoken about technology. And talking about technology, there are two ways in which you can look at technology. And I read Marx a lot myself. And in his thesis, in his 3 books of Capital, he distinguishes between natural technology and society technology. Natural technology is the shape of my ear. It's a natural technology. It's a, that kind of thing, or the size of a leaf of a plant. And that's what Darwin studied nature. That's natural technology. But society technology is how we organize ourselves as society to live and understand what influences our lives. Now, a knowledge society is a society where technology has advanced, and it has advanced, but yet we are not a knowledge society. And technology by itself is non-rival. You can actually be looking at the program for today, and I can be looking at the program for today on my phone, all at the same time. You can be writing in your diary, I can be writing in my diary. That is virtual. And that means in a technology-driven society, you have a non-rival situation. It is a society of abundance. There's no scarcity. Now, when we think about knowledge society and creation, knowledge society and knowledge creation to address poverty, we cannot do that without looking at preferences, influences, and the performance. Now, we ran a study as Statistics South Africa in 2001. And these are preferences. Now, we asked children who are 8 to 12 years, what subjects do they like? They said they like English. That's number 1. They like mathematics. Number 2, biblical studies. Number 3, accountancy. Number 4, communications. Number 5, science. Number 6, and geography. Number 7. That's for 8 to 12. Now, in 2009, we repeated the study on what they like. Mathematics came first. literacy came second, language came, technology, numeracy, and so on. Now, when they became 8 to 12 years, these children, the number of those who like mathematics dropped by half. Now, you wonder what has happened. These children, when they are young, 3 to 7, they like mathematics. When they are 8 to 12, they no longer like mathematics. Something is wrong in society to create fear for mathematics. Now, Verwoerd in 1953, in the Parliament of South Africa, asked the question, what is the use of teaching Bantu child mathematics when it can't use it in practice? And the desire to kill mathematics started. That is the basis for knowledge, which is this social technology that I talked about, was killed at that time. Our government further killed that knowledge base by introducing mathematics literacy instead of focusing on mathematics and ensuring that the teachers teach mathematics and teach it well. So that the children who are 3 to 7 who don't fear mathematics can be 8 to 11 without fearing mathematics. Now, you are parents, you are children, you are so and so. Once a child struggles a bit at school with mathematics, the teacher says, no, go for mathematics literacy. And then the president and the minister of education at the end of the year say, the results are better this year. So the school then gets into that mode. So the parents, the principal, the teacher, the president, and the minister encourage this death of societal technology by depriving children of mathematics and therefore walking in the path of Verwoerd. And that's the creation of poverty. Now, in the process of that, we ran a survey in 2016, and a number of children who are not in school, who are 7 to 18, said that they don't have money. They left school because they performed poorly. For the girls, a distinct difference occurs for those girls that they have family commitments. And for the boys, they have family commitments, but it's a very low percentage, 1.3. And for the girls, it's pregnancy. Suddenly, we find ourselves in that rot, gotten tenders. Then how can you see education as useful? It kills people and say we are doing better, when actually we are not doing better. This tragedy, we have to confront it in its true reality. If we don't accept the poor performance, then we haven't started atonement of the sins this city is sitting in front of me. Now, we ran the census of 2011, so I'm giving you facts. In the census of 2011, you will see, what do I do here now? Oh, let me do this. No, this way. This way. Now, those who have eyes probably can see these graphs. They are best seen on the screen. Now, this, now my computer will fall. Be careful how you hold it. Hold it to the audience. And then I will stand here. You see here, in 1953, Verwoerd says, what's the use of teaching Bantu child mathematics when it can't use it in practice? You see that graph there? That's 1953. We have population groups: white, black, Indian, and colored. Black, Indian, and colored were clustered right at the bottom there, while whites were there. Now, Verwoerd declares this thing. Then we go forward. No, this way. As we go forward, we see the Indians moving up that way, the green graph. The one of colors and blacks stays there, and the whites already, they were doing well. Now, we go further, and we see how the graph of Indians catches up with those of the whites in terms of performance at high school. That of coloreds and Indians, coloreds and blacks stick a little bit below. Now, we go further. Yes, so you can see the effect of Verwoerd statement in 1953 on the blacks and the colors. The Indians had a way to get out of that situation in 1953. Now, what happens in the next? Now here at university, all of you have experienced this. If you are black, a degree of 3 years, you will take 5 years or 7 years if you are lucky. Not because you are stupid, but these other guys, whites and the Indians do better. And I will show you how this happens. You can see how blacks' performance declines over time, and those of whites and Indians rises. Why? Because you are not funded adequately. You have to sleep in a toilet, and you are still expected to go and study. These are the realities of the problem. Not only at matric you don't pass well, and only a few of you do pass well, but at university you are not supported fully to excel, because in the 80s, blacks and whites were excelling at the same rate, but later they are not excelling at the same rate. And now, for as long as you don't have society that is well trained, you have a problem of that societal technology doesn't impact you as black people. And now the politicians like big numbers. In 1980 years, there were 5,000 blacks who would qualify and get a degree. Today, it's about 100,000. It's 20 times what it was before. And this graph, this side, looks very good. And the Minister of Higher Education will be very happy. But the reality, in terms of performance, is that one. You see that one below there. Relative to others. You see, that's the reality of our performance. Blacks are performing far less than the whites. Gone through apartheid, follow us to this day. If you are a woman and you are married, you will be lucky to stay 4 years on average in that marriage. If you are a black man, yes, you are in marriage for 15 years. Yes, that's the average length. And now the question is, if you are only in a union for 4 years, what is that we have? And we have to confront this challenge. Now, we as men, you see, that's 4 years women and 15 years men. So men are very lucky. They stay well cared for 15 years compared to 4 years for women. Yet the women carry the burden of children and so on, and bringing up children. What kind of life will those children live? Now, we are busy producing and reproducing poverty as black society. Now, 60%, that is 60 in 100, of men say they are married against 30 in 100 against women. Now, these men, the question is, who are they married to? Unless women marry 2 men, because that statistic says, okay, if 30% of women are married against 30 against 60, is 2 husbands to 1 wife. Now, this reality is problematic. That is 60% of fathers, the people that say, I'm a father, says that they are married against 30% of mothers. This is the dilemma we face. And now when it comes to sending children to school, so when you see Feast Must Fall, it talks to that dilemma. And the government only sponsors those who have enough, or rather sponsors what the so-called poor, and those who have joint income, that doesn't take them into poverty bracket, they are not sponsored. But that union is a broken union. And if we don't understand that, it's a dilemma. One of the things that I made at the Gehe Commission was sponsor everyone, black and white, rich or poor. After all, we want to make a nation. If you create a nation, you have to sponsor everybody. In South Africa, We don't have the space where white, black, colored, and Indians sit together, except at university in some great quantities. After all, at the university, that's where people have to decide and determine which direction a country should go. But when you split them and say pay for the poor and poor for, not for the rich, it's a stupid thinking. The only thing that we have to do at university is to say, tell us, you children that are at university, what kind of future, what kind of nation we should be. They must write every year. And what they write then should come to the political arena to execute those. That doesn't have poverty, but a united himself until he has worked on the numbers. I can say that myself because I'm free to say so. As a statistician general, he has to measure and report on what he has measured. As somebody who is an analyst outside that area, I can say anything I want to say, of course, based on what we are experiencing now, that the situation has been declining, not only because of COVID, but because of mismanagement, corruption, and everything that has happened. Now, see here, in 2008, you see that those dark purple bars. And here at the bottom is 25 to 34 years, and here is 15 to 24 years. Now, those purple bars in 2008 were longer. And in 2023, they are shorter. For these groups, 15 to 24 and 32. It means that fewer people who are 15 to 24 and 25 to 34 are now employed today than in 2008 against a growing population. Now, that is disaster. If you want to understand that, that's disaster. Only myself, I don't appear here, I'm 65 and above, but only those who are 35 and above are having themselves growing their numbers that are employed. For the people who are below that age, theirs is being eaten up. Their future is being eaten up. If you are under 34, your future, this country is eating your future. That's the simple message. Now, this graph here, I'll quickly go through it. And it's a graph that shows black, white, colored, and Indian. Now, when you look at this graph, those who are skilled, you can see at the top there, this one. Now, the blacks are stuck since 1994 as a proportion of their skill, and blacks and colors are 90% of the population. You cannot have a country that has only 15 or 16% of its population being skilled. It's doomed to fail. I mean, there's no other way. So I talk facts. And if we are stuck in that groove since 1994, and 30 years later, we haven't made that progress in these particular two populations that make 90% of the population, and only the 10% have made serious progress, then we are dead. Amartya Sen says people are battered in all kinds of ways in their lives, and the best way to resolve this is to look at poverty multidimensionally. Now, when you look at multidimensional poverty, those three, that bar there, as a contributor to poverty, you can see it's increasing, the red bars. And the second one is lack of education. So 63% of our problems are based on unemployment and lack of education. These ones of electricity and water and everything are important, yes, but our policy must be directed at resolving the issue of social technology, which is education, the brain, the way it works, because then it will resolve that unemployment problem. But while we are going for an election, we'll be crying around electricity. Of course, we have to cry about it because it doesn't exist now. We'll be crying about water. Of course, the Hammanskraal happened, people died there. And transport and all those things because children were run over by a truck in Pongola. And where children should go and play as people who play, because children had to die in Eastern Cape in Inyobeni. We have to have sanitation because Komapi cannot die in a cesspit. And we still say we are okay. It can't be. But those things are over-exaggerated. And they are over-exaggerated by design because people have been deprived of education. So unless we organize ourselves in social technology, we are not likely to actually succeed. Now, for the youth, the situation is even worse for those who are 15 to 34. 60% of their problems are on not having attained the right education. And their poverty is created that way. By not attaining the right education, the right skill, you have created poverty. Now, why are we in the mess we are in? It's because we don't pay attention to scenarios. We don't discuss things. We don't dream and dream in a way that says South Africa might be this way or that way, and what we need to do are the following things to come to a consensus of sorts. And unless you draw scenarios, you are not going to go anywhere. And we tried scenarios. 1994 to 2001, we had the Montflair scenarios. In government, I was working for government. From 2002 to 2007, we had scenarios. By 2009, we had a vacuum. We had no longer had scenarios. And that's a big problem. And the scenarios, this is the Montflair scenarios. Inclusive democracy, that was the promise, as well as inclusive growth. But we didn't get inclusive growth in the In 1891, there was a census run, and the person who ran that census of 1891 actually measured lunatics and so on, and they counted 474 male idiots and 482 female idiots. I was wondering whether the statistician general, a number of years later, wouldn't have been wise to measure how many idiots we have in the country now. Because I think the era of the idiot is here. And if you Google, you'll see that the issues around idiots have been, and this time around, the nature of idiots has increased dramatically. So that we should go back to drawing scenarios. And if we draw scenarios, we actually can know better and do better. And in fact, we can do better in terms of what my last slide will say. Business came to government and said, these are the targets that we'll achieve if we do the following. That was during COVID. Not that I believe in business, I don't carry a card for them. But the fact that they said these are the targets, and those targets I agree to. And we at Determinant actually looked at different policies and said, these are the targets, and those targets are almost the same as the targets for business. It is time South Africa sits down and looks at those targets that business brought about, looks at the intellectual reasoning behind those targets which Determinant brought about. And then we can march together to resolve these problems. It is still possible in this country that we can escape not only the Guaraguaras state that we have been in for the last 4 years, but the imminent vulture culture that is coming. Only then can we deal with poverty. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Pali, for that very insightful presentation, but also for painting the picture for us. When Dr. Pali was speaking, I was thinking of how every year when the Minister of Basic Education gives us the matric figures, right? And they'll tell us those exceptional stories, of Mang Kotembisa, who studied under a candle, and how, but against all odds, they made it, And they don't tell us the story of, a girl child in the Eastern Cape who drowned on the way to school. They don't tell us about children who drown in pit toilets, right? And how all those things really make up the scenario and the situation where we find ourselves in. But I also particularly like that, Dr. Pali is also saying that not all hope is lost, right? And that's why we're here as activists, as social change agents, as people who are disrupting, the situation as we know it. So thank you so much for that. I want to open it up to you, Maklabani, to see if you've got any questions, any thoughts that you want to share before I move on to our next speaker. I know he's spoken so much, and I know we can definitely relate to a lot of the things that he spoke about. So I don't know if there are people, maybe maybe. Mudimu. I don't know if there are people who've got questions or any insights. I'm going to take maybe 3 hands. Ewe, put it at the back.
Sanibonani comrades. Yeah, siyabonga Dr. Ntatepali. I think, yeah, it's a very good presentation and also iribula matlo. However, I don't think we are doing justice to it because it needs more time for us to understand it. Rona Bardula, maybe go the informal settlement. You talked about the issue of education. Retola very slowly, very fast. We need more time to discuss those things, and I'm also happy about that the idiot thing, yeah, that research, because I think really in today's life, witnessing is that idiot syndrome. Like where, we see multiple organizations where people are just divided, but they are having a common struggle. We always ask ourselves, I'm not trying to be funny or rude to other people, but I'm from Freedom Park. Freedom Park is just a developing area. It's actually informal settlement, but a little bit of the RDPs. But I always ask myself, how do we find DA go Freedom Park? What does DA represent in Freedom Park? I'm just asking Shilor, I'm not trying to be rude or somehow maybe somebody who think is a member of that organizations. Not your affair. I'm a comrade. When you entered here, you heard we were singing a song in Kululeko Mandela was Patela Yona, Nanamtlanja Sngakaiboni. So that basically what I'm trying to say is that research maybe it also needs to be, because I expect from our states and stuff to be shared with communities like ours, because sometimes we do have those time to discuss. Like Master Sugala, next week we will have to discuss the very same things as is Tolile Lana. So must we discuss, at least it must be intense. Ogotis assistant Sitole Ogote. The idiot syndrome yakula or yayehla, and not as soon fall into the part of increase ama idiots, So funukuba progressive mzabalazweni amandla.
Thank you. I'm going to take maybe 1 or 2 more questions and then give to Dr. Pali to respond.
Sanbonan, I'm from Freedom Park. Sithanda ukubonga kakhulu umsebenzi ka Dr. Bani njengoba bebayenza i-state sabo kuyindaba ye-maths bathole ama-challenge amaningi ukuthi black people badropa kakhulu ku-maths, and then while the time bebayenza uphenyo lwabo bathole ukuthi abantwana bayithanda i-maths, but only to find out the government of the day or even a deputy president, they don't accelerate in terms of reinforcing that passion, maths. So we've got the challenge. We know, maybe I'm coming over funny, we know government to iphetwe Stellenbosch mafias. If they see potentially maybe emntwini omnyama, they make sure ukuthi akasucceed umuntu omnyama. So it's a wake-up call as black people. We still have challenge in terms of schooling. We still have challenge in poverty. We still have challenge to look after our parents or after our communities. So hence, Comrade Peter alluded that Freedom Park. Freedom Park is not a suburb, it's a labor camp. Soweto, it's a labor camp. Most people, black people, where they stay in labor camp so that they cannot explore in terms of thinking and their ideas. No, thank you.
Oh, thanks. I heard the doctor saying from 2001 to 2006, we had a poverty decline. From 2016, I meant to say, from 2016 upwards, we had a increase in poverty. And mostly of the causes, according to the doctor, when I heard him, it was unemployment and education. I have an existential experience. For instance, in 1998, in most township schools, we had what is called technical education. Mostly on Wednesday, we used to call it technical school. But from 1998, it was stopped, meaning the decline in education started long before. So I'm wondering how can from 1998 to 2016, we have an increase we have a decline in poverty line, while the increase in education it was already declined before that. It's just a question. Just maybe you can assist me. And my thing, according to what I heard from you, doctor, you said from maybe 2001, there were imaginations that were going on around the administration. You were dreaming, you were conceptualizing how South Africa should be. According to what I've heard clearly, going forward after 2016, the imagination dropped. But my thinking, I think it's a policy issue, not an imagination issue. If we can strictly attack policies, because that's where the problem is. Because right now policies are talking about cutting social expenditure, and it's not a new thing. From the GEA policy, when it started, it was talking about cutting social expenditure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Can I maybe move to the next speaker, and then maybe we can consolidate at the end? No, Dr. Bali, you can just respond, and then we can move to the next speaker. And then the other questions, we can maybe pack them for the end.
Okay, yes, no, very good questions. Absolutely very good questions. Pointing to the dilemma that we have. Certainly, I'm available to present these kinds of numbers. I've learned the art of presenting this to communities. I can adjust both the language and the presentation to make this accessible. So I am available anytime, because this worries me. You can imagine when you look and you see the cliff, you don't sleep. The second issue, now my memory has just, but let me start with the questions that were raised. Yes, I mean, the scenarios that I presented, the Montflair scenarios were GEA scenarios, and that's where we didn't get inclusive democracy. We got inclusive democracy putting across, but inclusive growth, none. That problem still exists today. I was just showing that when you build scenarios, you can actually deliberate on policies, because when you create scenarios, you are creating the space for deliberating policies. We don't have that space at the moment. So because we can't talk scenarios, we cannot deliberate policy. And that's the dilemma we are having now. Between 2001 to 2007, things certainly got better. The evidence is there. But even then, the question was, what kind of policy frame were we pursuing? Of course, Deng says, it doesn't matter whether the cat is white or black, for as long as it chases mice. That's all right. So I think we're in that space where it didn't matter what the color of the cat was. But certainly, from then, we had a problem. So the points that I was talking about, 2001 to 2011, there was a decline in poverty because of what happened, including drop in unemployment. Poverty declined. But from 2011 2011 to 2016, poverty started rising. The AMBAH, when you look at the data as well, on the AMBAH side, those who trained after 1994, compared to those who trained before 1994, those post-1994 don't get jobs. Almost in 1994, when you compare graduates from university and AMBAH, they were performing almost at the same level in terms of employment levels, when you look at the data of those who were there. But after 1994, the AMBAH slumped. But those with degrees still performed almost at the same level. 5% unemployment, now it's gone to 12% unemployment. But for the AMBAH, trained after 1994, the unemployment is just bad as those who did metric. So your point of saying this thing that we used to do in 1998 got stopped, there is a solution. It has to be started. So the solutions are right here. The second question I can't remember now. What was it? But it's a policy issue, yes. No, there was a second question that came from there. I don't know whether I answered it. Oh no, it's a really a bad practice. Government has not served us well on ensuring that the teachers, I mean, it was the closing of the education colleges and so on, and all that kind of. So there are many mistakes that we have committed that we have to correct. Thank you.
Thank you so much, comrades. I'm going to welcome our second speaker right now. There's a song we used to sing, and it says, Sizongena ngefeminism, ayova, ayova, ayova. Rove, rove, rove. Arova, arova, arova. Sizongena ngefeminism, ayova. Arova, arova. Sitiro bawena. Arove, rove, rove. Amanda. We now know that I'm not a singist, so please don't invite me to come and sing. So yeah, we're going to be having a conversation between Unokwanda and Masa, and I'm going to start with Kialebocha, who's basically going to speak to us about, I mean, Dr. Tlale has painted the picture for us, right? But what does feminism say about this? Because we know that poverty is gendered, right? Unemployment is gendered, right? Inequality is gendered. Master Lokshin, who's going around Estratini, right? And so we just really want that gender perspective from Master to tell us how do we use gender analysis and feminism to change the story of our time.
Good afternoon again, Makaban. Hey, I was sleeping. What's happening? I'm hoping for a little bit more life in the room as the discussion goes. But I'm asking for a bit more guidance. Earlier I said, "Can I bua Setswana or ke bue English?" Rico kai English. Ke dira fan mixology nyana ne. Sharp. Ke tlo dira mixology. So can I pressure nyana? There's a bit of pressure because I'm the feminist in the room. I must come defend the women always. But I mean, this conversation I think is a very important one because I think we must first start at the beginning when we speak about the social determinants of health. Me and my comrade Nokwanda yesterday we were speaking, we were saying, hey, this English is beating us up because what are we coming to speak about, you know? It sounds like a very difficult and loaded word. And please tell me if I'm using my shop steward voice too much against the mic if it's too loud. Because we're asked to come and speak about health, and very often when we think about health, or about clinics, we think health means going to the clinic, I'm sick, and if I go to the clinic and I get pills, you know, that's going to make my life better. And in fact, when we speak about health, That's only one part of it. When we speak about health, we also are speaking about the communities we're living in. If we live in communities that are healthy for us, right? We're speaking about if we have the kind of infrastructure in our communities that enable us to stay healthy, right? So I've heard comrades speak about coming from Freedom Park, and one comrade said that it's mostly an informal settlement. And we don't have conversations enough about informal settlements in South Africa, for example, and what the implications have been for the health of South Africans, particularly black South Africans, right? Because it started, oh, we're all getting houses, and we've spoken a little bit about, the journey that we've traveled from the time where we came into this democracy and there were promises for houses and RDP, and then we got to that period where we thought, oh goodness, maybe we miscalculated about the number of people. Okay. It's fine, me, I can do this thing more. And then we miscalculated and realized that actually, maybe we thought we needed 10 houses, but we need 10,000 houses. So what starts happening is that our people then start to say, look, we need places to stay. We start to develop these informal settlements, and they're informal, they're temporary, right? And the government says it's fine. They're going to be there for a while until we build houses. Almost 20 years in, informal settlements have become permanent. They're no longer informal. But what we haven't done is plan for these informal settlements, right? Nobody knows how to police informal settlements, how to get an ambulance into an informal settlement, how to build schools in informal settlements. More importantly, how to keep the water running, or even just that water and lights going. Ne? So that is one part of the issue. And all of a sudden, then the issue of wellness and being healthy is no longer just that I am sick, I'm going to the hospital. It becomes there's no running water in my community, so people keep getting sick. There are too many of us in my community, so people keep getting sick. Children have no place to stay. So every week, my child goes to the hospital, and I have to take them because they're sick, and I don't know why. And then then you get told, well, you're not a good mother, you don't know how to take care of this child. But in fact, your child has no place to stay. They are playing next to a sewage, when you also don't have a place to go and pour water. And so because of that, it cross-contaminates. The child is riding the Buxton car into the water, into the dirt. And then all of a sudden, the health crisis is not just, I am sick, I have to get, The doctor spoke about Michael Kwamape and, the history of apartheid in our schools, especially in the township, where children are still having to be, and even in our communities, the number of Pitlet trains. Now I'm from Kimberley, which is in the Northern Cape. Yesterday, comrades said, do you have an airport in Kimberley? We do have an airport, comrades, but we don't have roads, and we have infrastructure issues. But when we speak about health equity, that's part of the conversation. We're not just speaking about the fact that clinics don't work, right? We're speaking about the fact that when you go with a serious illness, all they can say to you is, take a Panado. And that is a real issue. It's a real issue. And that stuff, though we experience it, and I'm going to try not speak. I can speak the whole day. We can leave. Until when do we have? Until tomorrow. It's fine. I'll take the first 24 hours to explain. And those things, they are real realities. And I've said when I started Hore, I want to speak about it, because my comrades, they understand these issues in a real sense. Ne? And I think when I speak about my recommendations, I want to touch on something that the doctor said about the idea of education. But I also want to argue that we need to think of a very different way of bringing these things together, because education for me is one step. Dirty water is a real one. It could be secondary, but it's real. The fact that children have no food to eat in their homes is a real one. And a child who's hungry cannot be educated. We know that for sure. A child who has to walk miles and miles and miles to go to school. There's Comrade Tracy, she's worked with the equal education kids, and we know what the realities are. When a child gets to school, they haven't eaten anything, they've walked 10 Ks to school. And then the teacher says, you're an idiot. We spoke about idiots, ne? You're an idiot. But the child is not. They just don't have a community that's conducive for them to learn. And that is a social determinant of health. That we cannot be healthy if I don't have food to eat. I cannot be healthy if I'm living in a home that is made from corrugated iron, but it's raining half of the time, and I have no place for shelter, proper shelter, right? I cannot be healthy when there are no lights, there's no water, there's a primer stuff. And I saw a clip this morning of a lady who was speaking about the fact that she says, I'm trying to do laundry here, but I have to walk 10 miles or whatever. Hey, I'm speaking miles. We're not in states, let me calm down. You know, I have to walk kilometers to get water, but at the same time, I have a primer stove in Lean, and it's going, and I've got kids around. How am I going to do this, right? And those things are very real in gaining a just and fair society. But I want to also move it a little bit forward. I said, well, I've been called to speak about the women, you know, the place of the women, and speak about the fact that inequality itself and poverty is a very gendered thing. It's not neutral, this thing. It's not neutral. Sometimes we speak about, and Comrade spoke about policies, we write policies sometimes and say, if I put in 2 cents, there'll be 5 cents at the end, and then that will be the end of poverty. That's not how the world works. Because of our history of apartheid and segregation and colonialism in this country, if we were saying that there's inequality amongst black people, that inequality doesn't just affect all black people the same. It affects women differently, right? This is why we have gender-based violence in our communities, because of this idea of how inequality plays itself out. We also know that women, for example, hold the burden of care. And by the burden of care, we need to speak about these things, because there's a comrade who asked, comrade, so we're saying that this thing of women cleaning houses is now work. Now, you know, women must get paid for work. But the same question went for that comrade who said this. Comrade, you go to work, you come back, you sit down, there's a hot plate of food. Imagine if you had to wake up, fix your kid up in the morning, make sure they get to school, make breakfast, make skaftin, get yourself ready, take the kids to school, work in a fabric the whole day, come back, cook, make sure that everything is done. And then I minus the job. You do this as an only parent in the house with 350 from government, ne? Because we also know from the statistics that the doctor has delivered is that actually unemployment is looking scary in this country. And in fact, in the next few years, more than half of employable people in South Africa are going to be dependent on social assistance. Not that they're not already, because we already know from the work that organizations like Black Sash do that already 8.9 million South Africans, more than half of them who are employable or are of employable age, are dependent on SRD. SRD is at 350. Ne? So every month, comrades who should be working, people who are, of working age. I mean, we're saying working age because we don't know what the dynamic is around why people are not working. But we know that one of the main dynamics is because they can't find jobs. And I want us to refute this thing. When I want to come into the responses and the recommendation. So people are not only navigating life with 350, but there's somebody, mama, who's looking after a whole family of four to 6 people, which is typically what the household looks like in South Africa, right? And right now in South Africa, for example, 51% of households are women-led. So when we speak about, communities that are not functional outside of marriage, I know we spoke about marriages, but that is the reality of our communities. That within the context of systems that don't work, no water, no all of these things that we need for our health, women are also having to take the responsibility of caring for people on top of themselves when it comes to, their own health equity, basically. So, and I don't want to have this conversation in a very linear way, because it's not just women. It's a lot more, nuanced than this. But in communities that we find ourselves, especially because of the migration past in history in South Africa, that's still ongoing, by the way. That very often people who are men have to leave homes and go and work, and that is the dynamic that persists. Secondly, it's not just that they leave home. Some of them don't want to take care of those homes, and then that's the dynamic that persists. So I think when we speak about inequality, poverty, and health, we need to have a very clear conversation that it's cool, that I can go to a clinic and get Panado, but I'm not going to get any better if the water situation isn't improved. It's okay that we say kids need to get education, or we need to improve education in our communities, but it's not going to get better. It means tired, and then I can't learn anything. We need to speak about health equity in a more equitable way. Equitable in the sense that we need to have a 360 view. That health is just not clinic going there and sister, when I want bora every week, you know. We need also compassionate healthcare practitioners who know gore ke kena ha every day because ngwana o tshamkela mo sewaging, mo eng, right? That is the reality of the communities that we work. And more importantly, we need policies that are conscious of that, right? So, in addition to that, I want to also speak about access to healthcare as an additional point, and then maybe go on to what I would, you know, looking forward to what this would look like, responses to some of these issues. In addition, I also do think that if we speak about access to healthcare in South Africa, we need to think about holistic healthcare. That sexual and reproductive healthcare is also an important consideration. And when we come in, and what I mean is that it's stuff like getting access to pap smears, it's stuff like getting access to gynaes, to support around, comrades are wearing TB hats here, support around HIV, all of that stuff. But also we have people who are LGBTI people in our communities, and they themselves should be able to go to clinics and get healthcare that supports them, right? Because part of health equity is going to a clinic and getting the health affirming, the gender affirming healthcare that I need so that I can navigate my life in a more meaningful way. So when we come with these holistic responses, we think about that how do we build communities that deal with these different things? And first of all, maybe going into the recommendations. I know that, since COVID, we've had something called the SRD, the 350, and that's in addition to the caregivers grants, the grants that have happened, right, that we've had for the longest time. Also with that is that now we're speaking about the NHI, right, the National Health Insurance. There's a comrade somewhere there at the back who made a very important point and said, we all are organizing around the same things, but in isolation. Ne? We're all speaking about SRD, NHI. There are comrades who are speaking about housing. There are comrades who are speaking about roads. There are comrades that are speaking about a lot of things, infrastructure. But nobody is having one conversation about these things. The fact that housing has to exist in the same context as social security, in the same context as quality housing, in the same context as quality healthcare, right? And for me, I think the future in South Africa, and some comrades might push back against this, but it's a reality for me, that we need to start speaking about something called a social protection floor. And what a social protection floor is basically a package that a South African or any person who lives in South Africa should be able to access and say, for me to live a meaningful life, I need to be able to get support, social assistance, so whether it's a 350 or more, but we know it needs to be more because 350 can't really do anything, right? But with that, I need to be able to access education, I need to be in a house where there's food, and I actually need to be in a house, right? Whatever that house looks like. And all of these things have to happen at the same time. And when we speak about a social protection floor, we shouldn't speak about, okay, if we have a grant, we need to take money from education or health. No. We need to think about how to make these things happen. Because health is, it's useful, but it's useless if I'm hungry, you know? Health is, education is useful in itself, but it's not as effective if I don't have 350 to help me apply for a job. Looking for a job is useful, but it's useless if I don't have that money for the CV, for all of those things. But all of those things are more powerful when we advocate for them together. And in a very end to austerity, there's a comrade who spoke about austerity measures here. Austerities is when we have to cut, money from strategic sectors because we're saying you're demanding too much. Because that's exactly what it is. You're demanding too much and we don't have the money. And so this advocacy for me, the future is for us, comrades of housing, comrades of education, comrades of 350 coming together. And my land comrades here, this one, progressive, yeah, we're going to, because we need land, comrades. And even if it's just to lounge on that land, we need it. Comrades of land come together and we speak about a policy around a social protection floor, where all of those things exist all the time at the same time. And that is health equity, in my opinion. Thanks, comrades. I think I'm going to leave it here. I can preach the whole day, but I think I'm going to leave it here and we'll go into conversation after this. I think just the one last point is that, comrades, in the context of speaking about policy, there has to be a point where we stop making gender neutral policy. We stop making policy that's not, where we don't conceptualize ideas of race and being racialized properly. Our policy, dare I say, has to be intersectional. We'll go into that one later. Thanks, comrades.
Okay. Sanbonan, as I mentioned earlier, ukuthi igama lami uNokwanda Sihlali, ngibuya eLand and Accountability Research Center. So Tina, our work predominantly looks at security of tenure issues in the former Bantustans. Former Bantustans, I think most of us understand ukuthi South Africa was separated. I mean, in its simplistic form, ukuthi South Africa be separated into about 10 countries, where you'll find Zulu supposed to go KwaZulu. If you are Motswana, you go to Bophuthatswana, etc., etc. As we know, there's Kangwane, there's also Venda, also as well. So these former homelands are spaces in which we understand there was 13% of the land where black people were moved into. So this 13% is the former Bantustans. So if we talk about issues around restitution, we say we want to go back to the land we come from, but we don't discuss the bigger part, and that is a program redistribution. So tina sifokasa ku tenure. Tenure iyakuvigela. Ithi akhonakala ukuthi each and every time uhulumeni is thinking ukuthi hayi wena ngathi khona something yenzakalayo la mele sikmove uyabona. So sometimes tenure it's just a way to protect your land rights specifically, and it gives you decision-making rights over your land. I'm going to give examples. I wish bengifana no Kia ngivele ngikhulume kodwa ngibhalile ke and ngibhale kanzima ngizoyifunda namhlanje. Kodwa before I go into that, last year besilana a constitutional court. We were here for a case. It was around the Traditional Khoisan and Leadership Act. We won the court case la Ekong Court, and it was won in the name of Constance Mukhale. Constance Mukhale was also Atlantic Fellow, not Health Equity. I think it's the racial one. And she was a fierce land rights defender. And I want us to also take a moment to see, acknowledge. I'm sorry. She was a dear colleague for me. She all the time is. Masithi amandla sithi awethu ngenkani ngizosho ke khona manje amandla wow hayi silele la benigroove ni groove la amandla ngiyabonga kakhulu. Bengifuna ukuqala ngokuthi whenever we think about land we'll always think ukuthi, especially in connection with health, the first thing oyicabangayo is ama vegetable, ama fruits, everything that I need to grow in order to eat and be healthy. As you said, the first thing you're thinking, amapilisi, grandpa, so amapanado food, so you don't necessarily think about land as part of your health as an everyday process, except with food production. So today I want to highlight the link between land, health, and dispossession. And because I work in the former Bantustans, bengicela ukwenza example around that. I know ukuthi predominantly when we deal with issues, as I say, Freedom Park, we're dealing with urban issues. But as black people say, I understand that we are very much connected when it comes to land, whether it's agricultural land, state land, rural land, urban land, all of that land, it matters to us in some shape or form, okay? So, the main thing, let me rather put it here, so according to the Office of United Nations, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, Impilo, so your health is the complete physical, mental, social well-being and absence of disease. So uyaphila alright, ingqondo, umzimba, all around you, uyabona. So masithi healthy uyaphila, asithi ukuthi nje siyakubona uyajima, hey ufit wena, ngathi unciphile. It's not that. Health and access to health is about your social environment. You highlighted ukuthi it doesn't matter if I can eat healthy, but nice rich la, I don't have access to education. 350 is doing nothing to support me and the family. Uyabona? So this is some of the definitions that highlight ukuthi just because awuguli doesn't mean that you are healthy. Okay? So masibheka futhi iyasho ukuthi the right to health includes factors that assist us to lead healthy lives. So as ashilo kiyo ukuthi sidinga water and sanitation, we need food and nutrition, housing, we need healthy working and environmental conditions, health related to education, information, and gender equality. Okay? So, definition ikhuluma ngayo yonke into oyidingayo yokuba healthy. So masikhuluma ngebiomedical lens sisho ukuthi abo doctor mabathi healthy yile yokuthi masibheka wena ngathi BMI right, inhliziyo, blood pressure right, diabetes ngathi ayikho, biomedical. But masibheka this one where we talk about holistic health, that's where we understand ukuthi government is also failing to provide environments that are good for us, economic systems that are good for us as well. And especially for abo mama, I think it's important to understand ukuthi i-workplace yes affect kakhulu. Umama uzofika ukwatile ukuthi awukhiphanga inkukhu akushaya ngayo but une-stress yasemsebenzini. And abo mama banenkinga yenhliziyo because also abo mama bakhulumi bafika endlini and then stress basikhiphe ebantwaneni. So that's why we understand ukuthi you can be seen as healthy ngomzimba. But if spiritually, emotionally, you are also not healthy, that doesn't count as health. Uyabona? So, mangkhuluma about umhlaba, I'm talking about also a health determinant. Uyabona? It is not only about having access to land, but decision-making power over what happens on your land that matters. Uyabona? But umhlaba la, South Africa usually, bawubheke ngokuthi umhlaba, how much does it cost? How much is it worth? And I want to also highlight ukuthi umhlaba, it's not always ukuthi mele siwubhatalele or umhlaba has social and cultural meanings. So for the fact ukuthi abo baba balele lana, that is a cultural meaning. So if something is going to happen where I can potentially be dispossessed, umuntu angiphuce ngomhlaba wami, ungiphuca my forefathers, about like my whole entire identity ngiyisa kuphi. So this is one of the reasons that we say government will see land and see money. They talk about productivity when they talk specifically about rural land. They talk about rural development. You want the land back, what are you going to do with it? So this is one of the things we need to change the language around umhlaba and how we view it. We need to view it from a different lens. And so this is one of the things that we were highlighting, Vele. And we understand ukuthi close to 19 million South Africans make up the rural population where customary law is practiced. So in 1996, Parliament yapasa Interim Protection of Informal Land Rights Act and ivikela abantu basemakhaya. Yona iyasho ngithi emakhaya okay angifuni ukuthi si generalize ne, but I'm going to use examples. In some communities that we work in, you'll find ukuthi if umuntu ufuna umhlaba akumele ukuthi ahambe aye enkosini for umhlaba. You can just go to the neighbor usho ukuthi ngibona umhlaba lana, can I please have a piece of land? You start leyo negotiation. Mayisuka lapho iya kunduna. Unduna uya enkosini ukonfirma ukuthi mina lo muntu lona ngizomhleplela umhlaba from le to le, this and that. Then when it depends also. Sometimes uzobhadala ikhonza, uzokhonza. Then after that kuzoba ne ceremony. And then siyakubeka lapho. Siyakubeka when uzobhadala ulethu utshwala ulethu ukudla, and then abantu bayakubona ukuthi oh, so you are a part of this community now. You do not necessarily need a title deed to prove ukuthi lo umhlaba wami, because you are protected by IPIRA. IPIRA is saying it's an informal land right. Angithi emakhaya asdili usually ngama-title deed. And it's not to say ama-title deed awekho emakhaya, akhona. But it's to say, usually si practice customary law. Uyabona? So in understanding that, when you have customary law and you are protected, things like development, it can't just come and happen without you having been consulted. But manje, because awunaphepha lokuthi ngihlala la, it doesn't mean ukuthi you don't have a right to make decision-making power over that land. So that's why ngithi umhlaba, having access to land, it's fine. It's great, but mele ube ne-decision-making power over that land. That's how you show ownership over anything. Uyabona? So even if ngaboleka ama-specs wakho, it's fine, I have access to them, right? But if I can't decide ukuthi ngifuna ukuwaphula, I don't have ownership over that thing. Uyabona? So I think these are also some of the issues that we are facing in urban areas as well, where we're trying to find ukuthi, okay, how do you ensure ukuthi you are securing people's rights? Because we find ukuthi title deeds at times, they are very good. They secure your land rights in a formal way. But in Kinga, you have one person who title, and it's they are on the title. Then you go and fight this issue a court. And then now we don't understand ama dynamics ukuthi ekhaya mangise emakhaya angikhona ukuvela ngifike lapha, it's a family home, it's a homestead. Sonke we have access, we have ownership over that space and use for it. If khona umsebenzi engifuna ukuyenza ekhaya, mina vele ngibuya eNewcastle, if there's something I need to do, siyahamba eNewcastle. Whether I'm living there or not, that's neither here nor there. We can negotiate those aspects because vele it wouldn't be fair ukuthi khona umuntu ohleli mina ngilike kumnandi but yena uyanakekela i-homestead. So these are some of the things that you have to work through and negotiate. But title deeds, we found that they actually lead to more land dispossession than actually a promotion of it, because it doesn't put everybody there on the title deed. So that's why CTE, Interim Protection of Informal Land Rights Act, is something that we need to pay attention to. Specifically because sikatele ipura every single year, but hey, renew every single year. There is no permanent law to protect rural citizens and their land rights. So this is one of the things that we fight for when we talk about Stop the Bantustan campaign. We are tired of all these Bantustan laws that come up. We have a traditional courts bill, the traditional Khoisan and leadership bill, and we had the Ingonyama trust case last year, where we show Uguti, land rights are property rights, especially customary land rights. So akonakali ukuthi if there's mining that's coming to the community, uvela ususa abantu ungakhulumanga nabo, especially those directly affected. Hayi ngaze ngayindlula ke le lontuzane manje. Kodwa ke I can leave that because I think also time is just not our side. So njengoba bengichaza ukuthi vele siyawubona ukuthi umthetho uyasivikela, kodwa ke siyabona ukuthi umthetho nezinto ezenzakalayo in the communities akuhlangani. So we also say ukuthi customary land rights are not being respected and recognized. I want to make this point using extractives industry. Siyazi ukuthi mining contributes 7.5% to South Africa's GDP because umhlaba, again, as ngisho ukuthi umhlaba, it's only viewed as a money-making thing. It's not necessarily viewed for social and cultural connotations that it has. So, mining is seen as something beneficial, not only for communities that are compelled to host mining companies, but for the country as well. Government views, especially traditional leadership structures, as custodians of land. So they empower them with decision-making power over land through legislation. So as I said, with decision-making power indicates ownership. So if we view traditional leaders as owning the land, we open up rural citizens to potential land dispossession. Because if a mining company yafika ukuthi ay man sithole lithium la, we need this thing, please assist us. Wena mele usuke la, but ngiyokhuluma nenkosi kuphela. You are directly affected. How are you going to directly benefit if this person is making a decision over your life? Uyabona? So this is why you have the KSEC versus Ingonyama Trust Judgment. Yasho ukuthi, these people have outward rights. They are the true owners of that land. So if uzoyenza anything, consult this person. And specifically the person who's directly affected. Uyabona? Angeke uvele ukhulume nami kanti ku-affecteke lapha nemuva. Uyabona? Mas ngathi lento le mayiphele khona manje. How do we make that decision? Uyabona? So we can't just say one person can make a decision for all of us. Mele sikhulume, but those directly affected, yibe kumele sikhulume nabo the most. Uyabona? So what we understand about e-mining is that we also find that mining companies apply for mining rights with the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy. They are obligated to fully articulate in their social labor plans how they intend to alleviate poverty, alleviate inequality, alleviate inequality and unemployment. Ne? They usually say we're going to build schools, so build clinics, so upgrade strategies, we're going to do all these things, good social labor plan. But at the end of the day, once the mining is complete, sometimes they don't even rehabilitate the land. And they've relocated you somewhere else. And a relocation, sometimes you'll find ukuthi bazonipa 10,000 rand. But mele uzoluza insimi. You are losing grazing land. You are losing communal land where you have access to things like rivers and forests. And manje, that's what you're going to use. Because ngicela sikhumbule ukuthi umhlaba doesn't mean the thing underneath. Umhlaba is not only the thing underneath. It's the air that you breathe. It's just the fact ukuthi kumnandi kuhlala la. That's umhlaba. So when you lose land, it's definitely hard to commodify it. Uyibeke uyipe in number when you're also going to lose a peace of mind. Because how do you quantify a peace of mind? And as I said, that also contributes to your overall health. So when we talk about umhlaba in the former Bantu stance, it's important for us as black people to understand whatever's happening there, it's happening to me. And it's important to support that because urban land isebenza iyodwa, rural land isebenza iyodwa, agricultural land isebenza iyodwa, kodwa asiboni ukuthi sihlangene and singasebenzisana kanjani. Uyabona? So for me, I think things like understanding ukuthi mining, it forces rural citizens ukuthi they carry the burden of air pollution. Uzothola umuntu sekayagula nje. But sometimes it does cause cardiovascular issues. We find neurological issues, and you find that contaminated soil awusakhona nokutshala. Uzotshala in lapho. So these are very important things for us to understand. The minute that you decide to potentially dispossess umuntu, it's because government is not protecting you effectively. And I just want to go to mention also quickly nama traditional healers, especially inyanga, the herbalist, bayasho ukuthi no, sometimes nathi makhona mining, we are greatly affected because khona la esakha khona imithi yethu, khona la makumele umuntu uyomcleanser, umcleanser emfuleni, you go to a specific space. But if mining comes there and mining izothi izovala lapho, inyanga izozithola ukuthi I need to get a permit to access that land. Sekumele ngibhadale ukuya lapha yana kodwa this was my land. So into engishoyo ukuthi especially because traditional healers are seen as primary healthcare providers. And I think it's very important for us to also understand ukuthi we have to protect that sort of space in different ways as well. Legislation, that's where our fault is. And that's what we also see, especially rural landscape where a customary law, amasiko wetu, abazi ukuthi bawahlanganise kanjani nomthetho. Uyabona? And mina ekhaya izinto esizenzayo azifani nezinto zakaboki. So akukhona ukuthi sibele sithi hayi bonke abantu abamnyama kumele bayenze so kiya mawuteta kenzakala so naso. So kumele understand ukuthi la kenzakala kanjani mangifuna umhlaba, la mangifuna ukuphisana ngomhlaba kenzakala kanjani. we can find ways to put that into law. Uyabona, angazi if abantu bafuna mining. I don't know if people want title deeds, but the main thing is that people must be empowered to say we want it or we don't. That's the main thing, is you must have a decision-making power in the hands of abantu, specifically rural citizens. And I want to say, Uguti, government yetu doesn't have to start from zero when it comes to these recommendations. There was a high-level panel report that was chaired by our former president, Tukhalima Motlanthe, and the panel also did provide recommendations on how to move forward, specifically with rural land rights. We had, we call it the Presidential Advisory Panel also, which had a report in 2019. We also had land conference. Oh, ngiyaxolisa. Yeah, we had land conference, which also then provided recommendations. So, bengicela ukuthi support kule campaign yethu to stop the Bantu stands. I think we'll share the information with Tekano, and then you'll also disperse. Ne? Ngibonge kakhulu.
Amanda! Amanda! Thank you so much, Nokwanda and Kialebocha. I think, you know, in Sesotho, Setswana, I think even in isiZulu, when people will say, you know, how are you, okay, right? We mostly respond and say, "Kiphetse, kiphidile," right? Which really interprets that I'm okay, I'm alive, right? And I think they really showed us when we speak about these social determinants, it's not just the absence that I'm kohloli, or it's not that. It's really about all these other things that make me okay, right? When we speak about unemployment, I remember I read this, I can't remember who wrote it, but this person was saying that when you're unemployed, you sort of feel like you don't belong, right? And that affects your mental health, right? That impacts you. When you're poor, you feel like there's no space for you in society. That affects your mental health, so you can't be okay. Right? Yeah, so I'm just going to see if there are questions as we close. We only have 10 minutes left as we close. So I don't know if there are any questions that you guys would like to ask either Kialebocha or Nokwanda, or any comments that you'd like to make.
Okay, molweni nonke apha endlini. It's not a question as such, ne? It's just a comment. Igama lami ndingunoma China Nzube ndisuka eFreedom Park. Ndizawukhomenta ngendaba yakwa health. Like sine clinic lapha eFreedom Park, ne? I-clinic yakhona ayisebenzi ngendlela ekufanele isebenza ngayo, because uyakwazi ukuvuka ngo-5 ekuseni but uyophuma ngo-4 ntambama babetshayisa. Ungakhange sometimes wenziwe nix, but no, sizakwenza i-list and then aba sebajikisayo bazobuya futhi babuye kusasa. So andibona ukuthi yimpilo eright leyo bahlali, because why? I think last year kuke kwatshona umuntu, washona umuntu wabhubha khona lapha eclinic eselayinini and egula lo muntu. Masimcelela ukuthi sicela ukuthi lo muntu niqale ngaye akakho right, but no, i-procedure la ayihambi kanjalo. So ndifuna ukutsho ndithi sometimes kuyamela sibe nakho ukuthi nathi sibe namavo, sibe nesay to say ukuthi lento lena noko ayihambi right, ne? And then ndibuyele kuwe ke comrade times ukuthi sizama ukuzithathela umhlaba, because why? Asinazindlu zokuhlala. Sifuna ukulima kahle kahle nokulima ukuthi ke sidle ukudla okutheni okufresh okuphuma phansi komhlaba. Sithe sahlangabezana nengxaki. Sadutyulwa ngamaphoyisa ukuthi nina nithi asifuneki kule ndawo esikuyo, kumhlaba kabani lona. Uthola ukuthi kubizwa umuntu wangapha eRussia, mhlawumbe lo muntu akasekho nokubakho, thina sikhona la and sifuna ukusebenzisa lo mhlaba. Uyayibona into njalo. So asikabikho kwimpilo eright kahle kahle. Andano ugovernment otholawulayo, or maybe sithi thina abantu asisazi amalungelo wethu ukuthi kumele siphile kanjani, or kumele lento siyifunayo siyifumane kanjani. Thank you.
Hi, sanibonani nonke. Thank you so much, Mase and Nowanda, for great presentation. I just want to highlight something that opened my mind, and I think about it, what is happening in our society, in our communities. Poverty is playing a big role. And not that the people on the ground are failing, but the system make us fail and look like failures. I was admitted in hospital last 3 weeks. The experience that I experienced and what I seen that was happening in the hospital, it was driving me insane. I just wanted to go out of that hospital. I spent 3 days in hospital. No shower, no water, nothing. We couldn't take shower. I just wanted to go out of that hospital. It was waking me mentally, physically, emotionally. I just wanted to walk out of that hospital. When I look around me, it's privilege, who didn't have food. The food they serve in hospital, it's horrible. If you think you are taking your family member in hospital to get better, no. We are killing our family members by these hospitals. They contribute to kill our family members in hospitals. So I think to you all, Makabane, we need to wake up and we need to fight this because a lot is happening in the hospital. And the last thing that they did was to me, they didn't want to give me my injection for the iron because it was written by the doctor that I must get an injection just because I had amakabane around who are doctors. They came to hospital to fight so that I can get that injection. What about the people who don't have anyone to stand for? What happens to them? They die in those hospitals. Those hospitals, they are no longer hospitals. They are leading you to death. So we have a beautiful bill of NHI. We need to start looking into that so that we can benefit from the private hospital, so that the less privileged people and the people who are using private hospital can also benefit from those hospitals. And then the issue of the land as well. Corruption is playing a big role. We had a problem in Khayelitsha in Cape Town where someone was given an RDP houses. But the people who has money sold that RDP houses to the people who can afford. Because the poor old man cannot afford to pay them or bribe them. He lose the house, but the house is under his name.
Amanda. I'm so sorry to do this, but because of the time, there's another group of people who are meant to use the space at 12. So maybe I'll just give Nokwanda and Masa just to wrap it up for us. However, just to say that we do have a stall, right? We've got a Takano stall where the other exhibitions are. So let's continue the conversation there. And we are over time. So stay tuned on our social media platforms where we'll host more engagements like this. But for now, let me just give thingy. And then for other people, you can come speak to them directly or come to the Takano exhibition. Like 2 minutes.
Siyabonga futhi just to be invited here because I think I had difficulty connecting land and health, but immediately mangibheka umsebenzi wami land, health and dispossession immediately merged together. So for me, I think we have a lot of our information, we have it in multiple languages, so I'm definitely willing to share it with Itikano to hopefully send to you guys. But also, we have AMA events as ILAC, and we'd also be willing to invite you. And even if there are events that you'd like us to come to, we'll also be available. So, yeah, I think thank you very much. Ngiyabonga isikhathi.
Sure. Well, and let's just leave it.
Thank you so much, comrades. Those who didn't get a chance to ask, please come speak to them directly. Alternatively, let's connect at the Takano exhibition. We have refreshments, some water. I don't know where the food is, but it's here somewhere. Amanda.